Hey, everybody, it's Greg Barron.
And I'm Kay Hanley, and you're listening to
Rock Out with Your Doc Out?
Rock Out with Your Doc Out.
Yeah. Yeah, Rock Out with Your Doc Out. And
Here we go.
This week, we watched a
Rockumentary
called A Band Called Dead.
Yes.
Which is about a band that was forgotten and then
remembered.
And then remembered.
Right.
Yeah, it's the journey of three brothers from Detroit who went from actual obscurity, not relative, genuine obscurity, genuine,
like not even existing.
This is in somebody's drawer,
right,
somewhere,
yeah,
to
becoming a huge sensation.
Yeah, in the hipster way, in like the cool way,
weird,
in the cool way.
Yeah,
yeah.
So, three black cats from Detroit playing punk rock music before anyone else ever did it, or
right,
anyone else ever even thought of it.
Yeah.
And so we watched the movie, and we would like to review it for you.
We would. We'd like to walk you through it and have you enjoy us
talking
about it. A band called Death.
1, 2, 3, now.
We stop on 11.
Yeah, this one goes to 11.
Is this one? Yeah, because I forget that the live
so
one.
much sense.
Yeah,
that makes
goes to 11.
so much sense.
So we do 11 a season.
Yes.
And then we will.
This season goes to 11.
Yeah, because I think we have to figure out what our assembly line is, because you and I both have the same problem in our lives. Fortunately, are not. You know, we're not just laying there with so much time on our hands to get it all together,
to watch the document, to give it.
Yes.
3-4 watches. It's like,
and I've had 3 people hit me up about being guests. So then I think, okay, do you want to theme a season and go, look, this time, these 11, we're going to have 11 guests, or 11 people are going to bring in a documentary that we'll talk about with them, or should we pepper that in? We should maybe we do one and see if we even like that.
Right.
But people have been like, hey, if you ever do Iron Maiden, hey.
Right. I've had that too.
You know, Bob Mayer wrote back, the guy who wrote the replacements book, and said, I'd love to talk about Dig. I'm like, okay.
Right.
He's a music journalist, but it'd be fun. And then also, when I started looking at documentaries, I was like, oh man, do I go Rock-a-Fire? Like, do I go, because there's some, like there's a Bang Tango one. There's one about the band Betty Blowtorch where I'm like, who the fuck are these people? And they made their own documentary, but some of them look super compelling.
And some of them just look absurd, which makes for as we know, makes for not so great viewing experience. Well, although in retrospect, you know, if we're using Rock-a-Fire Explosion as the benchmark for like shitty rockumentaries that made for great podcasts,
right?
You know,
but then looking back on it, we talk about this one. The one that is shitty that we never talk about is the Stone Roses, because it was just boring. It's just shitty. Boring. Right. Rock-a-Fire, I feel like is worth a revisit and maybe even a live one, because I think we should all sit down and in
like have a screening.
Yes, and like the Greeks, we should talk about it as a community,
right?
Because maybe
and just like have group therapy afterwards, just process it.
Yeah, I was surprised
on a group level.
This last time, how many people did not like Nick Bromfield and really had a strong reaction to to the Biggie Tupac thing.
Right. There is increasingly a vocal group of people who are listening to the podcast that are participating in the Facebook page. I think everyone should do that. I also think everyone should. I never understood before this the importance of rating and reviewing things. Now I'm doing it more because I see that like it's important to us that you rate and review our podcast. So if you would take a moment to do that, we would be so appreciative.
Yeah. And by that, we mean on iTunes. If you're getting it some other place, that's also fine. I don't know what the rating system is, but unfortunately, iTunes makes it a criterion as part of their algorithm of giving you visibility.
Yeah.
Which is
giving
fine.
You like an end cap.
Giving you an end cap. That's right. Yeah. Let alone an end store.
Whatever the digital distribution version of that is, of the end cap is.
Did Letters to Cleo get end caps?
We did. I remember there was a very specific thing that bands would do in the 90s. You would go and like just as important as going to the radio station or MTV or any of those places that played music.
Right.
Just as important, but not as well known, was playing the show for the distributors. So like whoever did like the regional distribution for Best Buy, like you would go to Michigan and you would play for them, and then you would get like end caps at all
they
the
dug you there,
Best
like,
Buys.
I'm gonna put this,
right, exactly.
right.
Like
And
you just
end cap-
go and do the dog and pony show for the distributors.
Right.
And now, of course, those things just don't exist anymore.
And we live in a very savvy world, but an end cap is basically where you're featured at the end of an aisle in the section where you make the turn or when you're coming in, right? Is that what an end cap is?
Yeah, it's sort of like the Planters Peanuts today at Gelson's. You know, like Gelson's didn't just decide to put Planters Peanuts on sale. They, you know, Planters Peanuts like is doing. There's some quid pro quo going on where Planters Peanuts gets that placement at the end of the aisle where everyone can see it and it's on sale. Everyone would buy it.
Frito.
This message from me to you brought to you by Planters Peanuts. Hey, Kay Hanley here. I have Letters to Cleo shows coming up in November. We're doing vinyl releases of each of our 3 albums. We'll be performing Aurora Borealis on November 16th, Wholesale Meats and Fish November 17th, and Go on November 18th at the Paradise Rock Club in Boston with Blake Babies, who I love so much. It's going to be amazing. Buy vinyl and show bundles or individual tickets on letterstocleo.net or Ticketmaster. Hope we see you there. Mwah!
Hey guys, it's Greg. I'm going to be at the Comedy Store on the 7th, a thing called the Resistance Variety Show, and I'll be headlining, and it is a benefit for mental health, because I do benefits now, is what I do,
I'll go.
benefits. I think that's what I have, just for now. Hey, be sure to follow us at Kay Hanley, at Gregory Barron, at Rockout, Dockout.
And on Facebook.
And on
where you
Facebook,
can have a lively conversation with other fans of the podcast.
That's right. And there's quite a few on there. And a lively discussion is always appreciated. You don't have to love it, but you do have to rate it. If you listen to it and you like us, we really need you to rate this show over on iTunes. And a review is great. You don't have to do a review, but if you have something to say, also if you don't like it, start some controversy. It's fine. Your opinions
we can have
are always
a feud
welcome.
with another podcast. I mean,
that's right.
Yeah,
We'd love to have food with another podcast.
Karen Kilgariff is just itching for fisticuffs.
Kilgariff needs a takedown. Yeah, if the bigger the podcast, the better. I don't know. Joe Rogan doesn't even know we're alive, but he will.
When I come
find
over
out.
there
We're
with
gonna
a
wrestle
knuckle
him.
sandwich for him.
I love it. I love a knuckle sandwich.
You're supposed to hate it. It's supposed to hurt.
Oh, I hate it.
You don't want one of
I hate a
those.
knuckle sandwich. Well, I've had a few.
Me too.
Yeah. People are like, you want to eat.
All right, rock out with your doc out. Woohoo!
See you soon. Bye. I know. Rick's like, we got to get real advertisements. I read that people who have good shows get advertisements, but we will.
My God, I will I will talk for days about some fucking mattress or Blue Apron.
And if you're out there somewhere like listening to podcasting, considering it, we love sheets. I like the ones that are on the Pod Save America because they're all things I'd use. They're all things I've looked
like
at.
squishy, yummy sheets.
I
will talk about those things.
Yeah, sheets, blankets, any sleep devices.
We will veer from the copy in an entertaining way.
Of course we will.
That will make the most of your product.
If I like something, I will sing your praises to the point where you'll ask me to stop because I'll use swear words. Like where Cadbury's like, please stop talking about fucking the candy. It would just... We get that you like it, but you've made it untenable for a lot of folks, and you keep talking about it. You're the leading voice in Cadbury eggs, and you've kind of fucked it up, so stop.
Just in time for Easter.
Just in time for Easter. Yeah.
Greg talks about filleting the Cadbury cream egg.
I do. The Cadbury cream egg. I like those flip side crackers. I made a big deal out of those.
I don't even know what the fuck that means.
Half pretzel, half cracker.
Ooh,
and then one side was
yum.
half pretzel and
With
half
the-
cheese cracker. Yeah, you'd flip them. They were kind of insane. They didn't taste like anything. You put it in your mouth and you go, that is not an experience I've had.
But a pleasant one.
Awesome.
A pleasurable
Right.
mouth experience.
Yeah. Not
You know
like
what
tropical
Henry says?
dots where you
Speaking
go.
of that, Henry just tries to say the thing, like really offensive words to me that make me want to kill him. And all this weekend, he just kept saying mouthfeel. And I was like,
Mouthfeel.
stop it.
Oh my God. What is mouthfeel?
Ugh, it's like the way a food feels in your mouth. And it's supposed to be like if you're describing like a food or like a wine. It probably started in wine world about like the mouthfeel is.
Oh, the mouthfeel. You're right. Have you noticed any sort of hipster language where you go, wait, what did you just say? Like
With Henry?
Yeah, or with any of your kids, where they say a thing. Like this weekend, for instance, Mighty said that something was a total smoke show.
Oh, really?
Which
Does
is just
that
another way
mean
for saying smoking, which is just another way for saying hot.
that someone was hot.
Dude, it was a total smoke show.
Right.
And I was like, fuck, there's something I kind of like. I mean, I love good words. I will never say it other than ironically because I don't belong around
Right.
anybody.
Right.
But sometimes you hear things, you go, that is so, what? A total
Henry
smoke show.
also this weekend, he's like, Mom, you're such a meme. So now he's using meme as pejorative.
As in cliche?
I don't know. Maybe. Maybe.
Like
Maybe.
a thing?
It was an insult. Whatever it was that I was doing, he was trying to insult
Henry's
me.
fucking tough, man.
He's a tough
He's tough,
lion.
man. He can go
He's
cold.
hard on me.
He can go cold.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah, he called me a
funny.
meme
You're a meme.
as an insult.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So
And do you ever go back? Would you try and hit him back with an insult?
not really.
No. Yeah,
No,
you
I'll
can't.
just be like, so I know you are, but what am I?
Yeah, memes are super popular. Are you a meme?
Exactly.
Because I feel like a lot of people don't know if you're a meme or not. So if you're saying super popular, catchy, things that people like, want to talk about, I'm a meme.
Yep, that's me.
Yeah, you're a total smoke show. Smoke show doesn't sound good. That sounds like, to me, smoke show sounds like a
Smoke
mess or
shop.
all smoke and mirrors or
But it means smoking hot.
yeah.
Like
She was referring to one of the
Yeah.
cast members of
like Riverdale or something.
Stranger Things.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
Oh my
I
God.
believe it was.
Stranger Things.
I think it was Steve. I think it was the.
Oh boy.
yeah. What's really interesting is watching how that's going to play out in the world. Well, it already is, but how it's going to play out fashion wise, as you
The
know,
80s?
everybody starts dressing in a way that we were trapped into dressing. Like people don't understand that. Like in the 80s, those were your choices, period.
Yes.
And that you were like, no, I have a flat down vest on that's block colored, and I can't get out of it. And there isn't a future where pants fit properly. Like I don't want my pants all the way up here. This is uncomfortable.
like
They cut
boys
me in half.
wearing mom jeans.
Yeah. Yeah. I was always like, how am I going to ever be trim enough to like, it just cuts me off at the, yeah. I didn't
But a
love it.
couple of my friends now have like seriously unironic mullets. Now, today.
Yeah. And
That-
are they, how old are they?
You know, late 30s, early 40s, like very stylish people
Yeah. Okay.
wearing,
Yeah.
and it looks good.
I tried to do it when I had
So-
my talk show and people were like, I don't know
You
where
had
you're
a
at.
mullet?
Yeah.
You were ahead of your time, or you
Yeah.
were in between your times.
It was a little bit during the Strokes thing. So it sort of felt a little bit like what the Strokes were up to. There's always that sort of
Right.
like
I've
rocker
never, I need to
haircut.
see footage of your talk show. I don't think I ever saw
I think you
that.
did yourself a grand favor. You can just, the Greg Barron show, you can YouTube it
Did it, but it was on the air?
for a year.
Really?
Like the way you said that is exactly the way people are. Like, it was on the air.
I am, and we're really good friends.
Yeah.
So I don't know how.
Daytime. It was 2006 to 2007. It was on during the day. We shot 123 or 33 episodes in a 3-month. Like
I bet you
3
were
a day.
awesome at that, Greg.
You know, on some days yes, and some days I looked totally like, why am I? What are we doing? Because a lot of it was like the same kind of talk show stuff where you're like, we're gonna get this family back together after the break. Like,
Oh no.
Yeah, there was a lot of like
Oh,
it's
boy.
its own whole thing. But I wanted to go with suits and short hair. Like I wanted to go very like almost 50s, like just
Mhm.
really clean cut. And they're like, no, that's not who you are. And you're probably too old to pull that off. So then they gave me vests and stuff. So then my hair was super bleached and I started to comb it into a mullet. And I look like I had been I was on loan from a Stray Cats cover band.
Wow.
That wasn't too good. Like I had the one Brian sets at the height of.
So a little pompadour
A little bit
action
pompadour,
going?
yeah, because I always pull it back,
okay,
so
great.
it was
I
like
see.
that. But then some of it sort of went off to the sides. And,
Right.
You know, the Replacements had mullets, but they did it in a way that made you go, that is so cool.
Well, they had like they really look like ratty kids.
Right.
So
Right.
they just
they
always
look like the
look
kids
like
from Stranger Things.
they did.
Right.
They did. They
Yeah,
just
yeah.
kind of like, but in a way that's just kind of timeless.
Right. Right.
Somehow. I don't know how that works, but I think there's just like there's kind of like a rock and roll uniform that never doesn't work. Maybe.
Yes, but on a certain dude, and on other people.
Right. I mean, it
it's
has
like
to be legit.
Yeah, you have
to be a little bit of a hoodlum, which is what
That is the thing.
it's a hoodlum look.
It's a fucking.
But it's-
that's
but it
really
has to be
accurate. Kay.
authentic.
Yeah, you have to be. That's why when you would see it on like Paul Young or any of the Duran Duran people, you'd be like, "Well, guys, this isn't." I mean, maybe John Taylor's a bad boy, but not in a way that.
Have you seen John Taylor around lately?
Yes.
Kind of still looks a little. He's
He-
still very handsome.
Yeah. I saw him one day and went, is that fair? Because we're the same exact age, I think.
I think he must be a little older than you.
Maybe, just slightly. Maybe. He might be 55, 56.
He's a very nice looking man.
yeah,
I
so
see him out and about in Studio City.
I do too. And then I had one interaction with him, and he was super, super sweet.
He's very nice.
And his Duran Duran money is his walking around money. How
Oh,
about that?
yeah.
What about when that
Yeah.
whole career is just your pocket money because your wife sold $1 billion company?
Is that true?
Yeah, his wife's one of the people that invented Juicy. Couture and then sold it.
Oh.
So Duran Duran's like
so
the
she's
money.
got more money than he does.
Yeah, that's just their fuck you money is the Duran Duran money.
Shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up. I'm not even kidding.
Wow. That's amazing. Hey, maybe we should get to the podcast.
Let's do it.
It was a great time. It was that Motown time.
And you know, here we are in the middle of all of this playing rock and roll.
1, 2, 3, now!
Nobody was making music like that in '73.
3 black brothers from Detroit, Michigan.
What were they called?
They were called Death. That's a good name.
Have you lost your mind?
Told us you guys might have a record deal if you changed the name.
Absolutely not. We are fighting to maintain our identity.
It's pretty hard to be black playing rock because you had to be Motown if you were black.
White boy music! We got turned down by every major label.
I just put the tapes in a safe place. I didn't think about it.
One day the world's going to come looking for the Death Master tapes.
There's been hardcore history sitting up in that attic, and no one's known about it.
We're just now discovering this band that had been sort of lying in wait.
Something they pressed 30 years ago, selling for $800.
Dad, why didn't you tell me? He says they're playing your music at underground parties here.
It's been 34 years since the songs have been heard.
It's one of those things that keeps you going to the record store, hoping for another great story like that.
Hey, my name is Kay Hanley,
I'm Greg Barrett.
and you're listening to
Rock out with your
Doc Out.
rock out with your doc out. I gave it as a credit the other night at the show, and people started laughing before they even really knew what it was. They were like, "That's hilarious. What is it?" It's rock documentaries. And people were like, "Oh, that sounds interesting."
See, that's why the name works, Greg. This
Yeah.
is why you're such a genius, because the name is
You
what the
came up
show
with it.
is. No, you did.
I think I said it wrong, and then you said it right. I think I said take out your doc and rock or something.
No, well, you fucked up the name a couple of times
Yeah.
when we were doing the podcast, but you came up with the name.
Oh, okay. Well, I
You
still
really
feel like
did.
I give you the credit for it because I feel like you maybe said it back to me the way it should be.
Oh,
I think you actually said
You know
rock
what?
out
Let's
with
just
your
say it's a
doc
team
out.
effort.
It was a team effort. It was a solid team. It's a good look. It says exactly what the
It
podcast
is what it is.
and we have taken our documentaries out and we have rocked them so far. 10. This is the season finale, 11 of season 1,
which is today,
which is today.
because this one goes to 11
This one goes to 11.
this
is like-
season. Okay, so today's rockumentary is a band called Death, directed and produced by Jeff Howlett and Mark Covino in 2013. And Death was a proto-punk band, 3 black cats, in the words of Kid Rock.
Yep.
3 black cats from Detroit.
Yep.
Who had a punk rock band before anyone had a punk rock band, and they died a death of
they were a hard sell.
Obscurity.
Yep, obscurity, right? They were
That before anyone really knew what they had done. But they left behind a body of work and just enough breadcrumbs for people to find them in the early to mid aughts.
Yeah, it's a really cool, interesting story. I remember seeing the documentary trailer when it first came out, and you're surprised when you're like, "There's no way I don't know about this. This can't be real?
Right?
How did
exactly.
this get missed? Like, here is this pre-punk. It starts in the same basic era as maybe a little bit earlier, around the same time as MC5 and Iggy.
Mm-hmm. It was 2 years before the Ramones hit.
2 years before the Ramones, right?
Right.
And they're 3 black brothers. Whose last name is Hackney.
Mm-hmm.
And they all grew up loving music.
Yep.
And Michael, right? That's the singer, the brother?
The brothers are David is the lead brother.
That's right.
David is sort of like the mad genius of the whole thing, and he runs the band. He's got like this. I mean, Death sounds like it would just be, that it's supposed to be really provocative. But David, the eldest brother who conceived of this band, he really had this was a high concept for him. The band, they had been playing together their whole lives. It was David, Bobby, and Danny were the 3 brothers. And they grew up kind of like in the bosom of Motown.
Mm-hmm.
And
right, they grew up in Detroit.
And they had been playing, they got their instruments. There's a clip about that. We'll go back to that in a second. But we'll stick a pin in that, as it were. So the way that they got the name was they were a really tight-knit family that actually had one more brother the eldest brother named Earl, who hit the whatever it is. What's the closed caption thing below? When he's the talking head, it says, "Not in death."
Not in death.
Not in death.
He's not in death.
Right.
Because,
so
by the way, these guys, all 3 of them, and the mother, and the subsequent children from this family, there's a strong DNA that makes you go, fuck, they are all, I'm not going to say it's like an Eddie Murphy movie where he plays all the parts, but they are so similar that you are really genuinely not sure who's talking.
Yes.
And at one point I said, wait. Is this a gag? Like they are, the whole family looks very, very similar.
Yes.
Right?
They do. Totally.
It's hard to know. You're like, wait, which one is this again?
Right.
Yeah.
And they all had the same dreadlocks.
Yes.
And the same.
And they all
the
have
kid,
a very,
we'll get to the grandkids later on.
Yeah.
That there's so much to this story. The way they got the name Death was because the father, the patriarch of this family, again, they were all very close.
Mm-hmm.
Dad was like an electrician, but like he worked for the utility in Detroit. And he got in, one of the kids who was training under him got into an accident. And the dad put this trainee in the car to drive him to the hospital. And then they got hit by a drunk driver. And the dad who was rushing this kid to the hospital was killed instantly in the impact. And it had such an effect on the family that I think the way that David seems to have coped was developing this like big, like this larger meaning around the word death. And so that's what he named the band. And he had this whole philosophy that went along with it. So he was a little put out by the fact that people didn't understand or refused to take the time to read beyond just the word death, because people were obviously put off and were like, that, as soon as they found out that the name of the band was Death, they were like, pass.
Right. I mean, up until this point, like band names, like maybe the most provocative would have been something like Black Sabbath, or like there just wasn't the names just weren't that scary. There wasn't a Sex Pistols yet, and Iggy and the Stooges or the MC5 or the Ramones are innocuous comparatively. But so they call themselves Death, and it's real, and it's meaningful, and it's not just provocative. But
for the sake of it.
Right. But then their music it's sort of hard to kind of...
It's not very Death-like. Like it's the interesting, I found it really interesting that like there really was no punk rock when they started. And these were guys who, again, like grew up in the Motown thing. And then the eldest brother, again, David, went and saw The Who and was like, just had his consciousnness blown up out of his head.
Right.
And was like, I have to do this. And then they saw Alice Cooper. And then they started seeing all that music. And David said, if I don't do this music for the rest of my life, I'll never be happy.
And
that's what he said.
Yeah, right.
About rock and roll.
Right.
And they from that, they came up with their sound, which is unmistakably punk rock, but no one had ever done punk rock before.
It's right. It sounded
so
like,
crazy.
if anything, if there were any other, like it sounded, there were parts that were like The Who. If you just took a middle fast part out of The Who, there are parts that sound like a lot of the middle eights in Rush songs, where the song just decides to go into a gallop, where there's like like that. But that's their whole song. It starts there because the bass is moves. The bass is like like there's not. It's not just that. So there's a prog. There's like a prog thing happening. Like there's a playing.
Yes, you're right.
Right. There's a little prog thing, but all of the songs, most of the songs, start off pretty like challengingly punk. Like that's an odd chord, or there's a weird little note thrown in here or there. And fast, and not like kind of anything. And certainly you have to remember, just like with everything else in the world, there was prejudice or just unsort of spoken, like, but black people don't make. That's,
right.
Hendrix was this weird thing where people had to keep connecting soul to him and R&B and the blues. They had a hard time just throwing rock and roll on Hendrix. They had to keep putting those other things in there so that they could make their own. How could a black guy be playing white,
just straight rock and roll?
Right.
Like,
I mean, maybe it may be
the greatest rock and roll guitar player of all time without it being influenced by without having all of this like traditionally black influence.
Right. And this is straight up rock and roll. Like it's not anything else.
Really
it has pieces
except for the bass playing, now that you mention it.
Yeah.
The bass playing is pretty fucking soulful.
Right. But that to me too is also like the guy who's like, yeah, I'm not just playing bass.
Yeah.
Right. Like my buddy Greg was like, yeah, no. Like we were trying to start a punk band. He's like, but I like Stanley Clarke and Jaco Pastorius. I'm like, well, you picked the wrong group to be. We can't. Those are, that's a lot of notes. Our
bass player plays no more than 3 chords.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Or get a guitar, guy. Get it. Get a guitar. Do it. Or the horns.
Right.
But,
keyboards.
Yeah. So they make this really unusual, very interesting music.
Yeah.
That like, again, I was like, how did I never hear about this?
Well, here's how you never heard of it.
Yeah.
They made every single thing they did was the wrong, I mean, ultimately the right choice, but everything they did was the wrong thing to do.
Right.
Like starting with naming their band Death, because Death really was like the death knell of their band. Like no one would touch them. No one would touch them. People just didn't even give them a chance. The other thing they did, which is really funny, is, they were like, well, we need some kind of they knew enough in their sort of little bubble of Hackney, just playing up in their attic, they were in their own little world. They knew enough that they needed like a record deal. So they got out a phone book and they hung the phone book to the wall. It opened up to like the music production pages. And then one of them stood back and threw a dart. Literally, this is how it happened. And it ended up on, what was the name of the
studio?
The studio was Groovesville Productions.
The studio was
Groovesville Productions was the name of the production company. And then they ended up recording their album or what would have been an album at United Sound, which is where all the huge Motown records were made. I mean, this was like, this was the studio in Detroit. And it's funny, just total sidebar, Letters to Cleo recorded at United Sound.
What did you record
on
there?
the road? We
That's
recorded.
Funny.
We were like on the road. It was this period of time where we'd like have everyone was putting out like soundtracks and benefit albums and stuff, and there was this either Rock the Vote or Rock for Choice thing,
right?
That we were always contributing songs to stuff like that. And so we were on the road. We were doing a cover of Dreams, and I had horrific
Fleetwood Mac's
Dreams.
Yeah.
For this Rock for Choice sound album, compilation.
Yeah.
And I had we started recording it in Los Angeles, and then I had horrific laryngitis. So like a day later, we were in Detroit playing a show, and we just like booked studio time at United, just hoping that my voice would come back enough to sing Dreams. And I did. And you can hear that if you hear the version, you can totally hear that I have laryngitis. But we were like so in awe. It's so not our world. Like the Detroit, that Motown scene.
What was that studio like?
It was fucking old school. It was like orange shag carpet and just like gold and platinum records everywhere. It's just like seriously OG shit. It was
love
amazing.
that. It's funny because that's what Sound City was like.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that I had been in Sound City because I was friendly with Tool, and they were working there. And
you were friendly with Tool?
I was friendly with Tool.
Really?
Yeah, I was friendly with Tool for a while. Yeah,
we need to know more about that.
In Maynard, we can.
Maynard seems like a nice guy.
He is a good guy. He's a trip. He's a lot of things. But anyway, they were recording, and they invited myself and the people that I came down here and was in a band with briefly. And anyway, we went and watched them record, and I didn't realize we were in Sound Studio, but I remember leaving going, it fucking smelled in there. Didn't it smell in there? It was like wet, like like carpet keeps wet. It just stays in there. And everything, they all were. That one in Sausalito where people recorded, and the record plant.
The wooden, just like all the wood paneling, but like dry. Yeah.
Yeah. And also, rock and roll musicians, right? Like some of these people are like pirates. This is, there are certainly some well-educated, interesting folks, but there's also just some animals that record and make music. And so these places have housed bad behavior for years. And the people that own it usually are dudes that are like, do we have to clean that up? We're not going to clean it up, right? We'll just vacuum.
Yeah.
Like that thing of like they were not kept up in a way that you would, because they all smelled, and they were all like, I don't know.
Musty, but with old cigarettes and.
Right. People should have said, just bring towels so you can sit.
Cocaine in the air.
Yes. Yeah, you can smell you can tell there's a little failure in here. There's a little glimpse of success, but more failure. That's so interesting. I want to hear that. We'll have to reference that song.
We should totally back up a little bit, because we need to talk a little bit more about the family and the mother's influence.
Yeah. Like
one of the things that I thought was so moving was Mom, and how she just believed so much in what her kids were doing. Yes. And so they didn't grow up in squalor or anything, but they were not rich or well-to-do by any stretch. So at one point, Mom got into a car accident, and apparently she got quite a settlement for her injury, an insurance settlement for her injuries.
That's right.
So she asked the boys what they wanted to do with their cut of the money. And so this is the story about that.
One time we had some good luck in our family, and our mother got a settlement from a car accident, and suddenly we had some money. And she gave us kind of a choice of what we wanted to do.
First thing we did was went to Manny's Music, man. Manny's Music! I brought a Rickenbacker guitar and a Fender guitar. David brought a brand new Fender guitar.
Bob went and bought himself an acoustic amplifier, so I had to have the best drums I could find. I went and bought me a Slingerland set of drums.
I had a bass, Dennis had some drums, David had a guitar. We started jamming together. Here we go.
So cute. And also,
amazing.
Yeah. The Rickenbacker bass, it's so funny. It's so of an era. Like the Slingerland drums, the acoustic amplifier, like, the Fender guitars. Like, and that's a straight up.
That's some sweet gear.
That's some sweet gear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I love that we finally had some luck. Mom got in a car wreck,
accident and didn't die.
And we got a settlement. I will say though, from the minute these guys are on screen, like I got, somebody wrote me back about the way my treatment of, the singer of Lamb of God, my being suspect of the thing, saying he's a pretty good guy, And I said, I know, but it was just the vibe that I took from it. And I will say right off the bat, these guys are as lovable. Like there's hardly I don't know that there's an objectionable moment about them at all. Like
they're so earnest,
humble.
Mm-hmm.
They're not all there as we know, as we'll reveal, but they are, they're not bitter.
No,
they're not bitter. And it's a big deal. Like the emotional weight of all of this, like you can tell, like, it's interesting. I was going to ask you about this, about like their connection to the music. And I guess cause they were all brothers, but it was a heavy thing, making this record or being this band. And then it ceased to exist at a certain point, and it's just not easy for them to even talk about it.
Well, their struggle was a pretty typical struggle for, most people who try and do something creative for a living.
Right.
There's a lot of rejection,
right.
And at some point you have to decide whether you can handle it one more time, like how long are you going to suffer the indignity of trying to meld your art with commerce?
Right.
It's, the road is paved with a lot of pain and heartache.
Right.
And just like you are terrible and you'll never make it in this business.
And also you're black, and also you're from Detroit,
and
also you're so many things that are,
and like your name is Death.
Your name is Death.
And honestly, at one point in the show, in the movie, it's revealed that Clive Davis, I mean, how much of this is true and how much of this is kind of like the legend they created? I'm inclined to believe that it was true. For another thing they did wrong, by the way, before we get to Clive Davis, is that they really went with a Motown production people, and like all the people who are handling all the Motown artists, that's who was handling Death, and they didn't know what the fuck to do with these black guys playing this crazy loud music.
There's really not a Motown moment to be had in any of their music.
And as soon as anybody from their camp tries to sell anyone else on the band with the name Death, the door just gets slammed shut instantly. No one even wants to hear it because their name is so objectionable. So at one point,
go ahead.
I was going to say, well, as soon as Clive Davis is like, I will take you, I want to work with you, but I can't sell a band called Death,
Right. And this is that, like, and this is a recurring theme in a lot of these things, but the I won't compromise guy, because the bass player and the drummer are both like, yeah, man, we'd have called it anything else. I'm ready. I'm ready to do whatever. Like, they were like, we just like playing music. We are whatever. And there's always that guy that's like the guy who's the genius, who's like, and you always wonder in these stories, like, when is compromise okay and when isn't it?
Right. I don't think you know until
I just
after
don't
the fact.
think you know. You either look like you're a really intuitive person or an asshole.
Right. And in this case, David, the older brother, looks like an asshole because he absolutely 100% refuses to change the name. He is just like, if we don't, everything begins and ends with the name. Like, he has this, again, like this grand concept that began with his father's death and like how to make sense of it. It's really a concept name, a concept band, a concept album. And like, he feels like if any of those variables aren't in the equation, that it's not, that it doesn't work.
And there's only photographs of him. There isn't any video of him. So it's hard to know. You're just getting him from in story, which you already at the beginning, you start thinking he may have been one of those outliers. Like he may have been one of those sort of geniuses that was headed for.
That could have been like the Unabomber eventually, like just so set in his ways.
Right.
That there is no way he'd ever be able to fit anywhere in the world because he's so unbending in his philosophy about everything.
Right. There was no, the means justify the ends with him. Or as some of those people are, sometimes it's funny how it plays out where later on, in the case of the Ramones, certainly the Replacements, even a little bit with the Pixies, sometimes we're like, no, later was your time. Because you stuck to what you did and because you were obstinate, because you refused or whatever, or because the band couldn't continue or for whatever reason, it then later on became your time. Whereas with some people, it's like, no time will be your time. You blew it.
The whole thing about these guys, though, is that so David is like this obstinate, iron fist ruler of the concept.
Mm-hmm.
And the other brothers just end up having this mantra of go with your brother. Go with your brother.
Right.
Whatever David says, that's what we will do. This is his thing.
Right.
And so, not surprisingly, the whole thing collapsed under the weight of that. They lost all the deals that had ever been on the table were gone. The Groovesville people were just like, you guys, we can't do this with you anymore. David somehow, I don't know how he knew to do this, but he got the masters back.
Right.
Which is very unheard of, especially in those days when it was I think that they just felt bad for these guys, you know? So here's another thing that went like comically wrong, but right at the same time. They have the brothers or the Hackneys had family in New England. So they invited the guys to like come and just like reassess their lives in New England. And so they went. These black rock musicians with dreadlocks go and live in Vermont.
Right. Yeah.
Which is about as un-black punk rock as you can possibly imagine.
That's where Ben and Jerry's is from, right?
Yeah.
It's an ice cream place.
It's
an ice cream place.
Like,
it can be a hippie place.
It's hippies.
Yeah, it's hippies.
Ice cream.
Bernie Sanders.
The proletariat. Yeah,
right.
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
All that shit. I mean, actually, but that's what I'm saying. It's like everything that they did. It looked optically, it was just the wrong thing.
Well, especially,
but it worked out so well.
Right.
In the end, right. And so all the brothers went and kind of like to put their lives back together. Eventually David is like, fuck this Vermont shit. I want to get out of here. Let's go. And the two other brothers, Bobby and Danny, were like, we don't want to go back to Detroit. We like Vermont. Now they have wives and families that they're starting. And so Danny goes back.
But when they got to Vermont, they wanted people to know they were in town, so they put up, because I think this is really interesting. Right. So they put up posters all over town, and the posters, and this was never talked about. I was going to ask you. So the posters were amazing. I'm sure just one of those would be worth so much money. But they're just black triangles with the word death written in Old English or whatever that font, right? So it just looks like protest, or it actually looks like, remember those old, the silence equals death?
Yes.
Right. The early AIDS. Right. Yeah. So this it's, you don't even know that it's a band. Like it looks like a cult or something, right? It just looks like a message of like, something bad could happen. Yeah. So not doing themselves any favors at any turn. Like their initial thing was to come to town and people are like, what is happening? But that imagery did show up later in pop culture, which is sort of interesting because I do feel like it does. I feel like the early versions of the silence equals death, the graphic part of that campaign was very similar to those posters.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's a fact, but it just,
it's David was always very confused that people never just didn't get it. So the police paid them a visit. And
as you would, like we're listening to go.
Not
if I'm a
because they
cop,
were black dreadlocked guys from
putting
from
up death
Detroit.
posters. You just want to go look. Hey, fellas, can we have a chat?
Right.
Just a chat.
And that's what they did. I mean, it's so funny because the way Bobby and Danny tell the story, it's like they're just like, so the police came and they were like, no, please don't. And they just they're just like the sweetest guys.
There's no victimizing on their part at all. I would imagine if the brother was around, he'd have a few complaints.
Right.
But they are
they were peaceful about all of it.
Totally accepting and kind of comical about it. Yeah. And certainly I would imagine when the cops met, at least the two of them, they would have gone, well, these guys are fine. They're just in a dumb band. I mean, it's a dumb band, but that kind of a thing. Just a little side note. I was in Sacramento years and years ago when I was first doing stand-up, and everywhere I went, there would be like a handbill or a poster, and it would be like an insect or like a mop or like just some random image and the word cake.
Cake, yes.
And it's when Cake was becoming a band. It was so compelling. It was so the font that they picked for Cake, and then the image was always, not Cake.
Right.
In so many ways. And I was like, I had no idea what it was either. Like I assumed, but I was really curious. Yeah. Yeah. But whereas the death one was like, that made me go, fuck, something bad is happening.
Something bad's
happen. Something bad's coming.
Yeah. No, I mean, before I ever saw this movie, like when stuff was going on, when it had like a bunch of buzz and hype a couple of years ago, I remember thinking like, oh my God, that sounds really scary.
Right.
And it's not scary at all. That's the thing about this movie. If nothing else, it's like death is not scary.
No, not at all.
And so David goes back to Detroit. Danny and Bobby stay in Vermont to raise their families. The band breaks up. The end. Danny, one would think that would be the end.
Right.
David becomes, not surprisingly, victim to the bottle, becomes a terrible alcoholic.
Right.
And Bobby and Danny thrive.
There is a moment, though, and I'm trying to get this right. Isn't there a moment, I don't know if it's right after that or if it's in between Vermont, where they did change the name from it to the Fourth Movement?
Right, and they became,
they made the same kind of music, but it was spiritual. So it was still punk rock, but it was about Jesus. And
then they got some like seriously Spinal Tap reviews.
Right, people were like
shit sandwich
kind of they were basically saying, this is good, but lose the religion, man.
Yeah.
So
it's just more projection.
But then, but before when we were doing it without the religion, nobody would even open a door. Backwards.
Yeah, they did not have great business acumen. No. They did not. So, so the Danny and Bobby start a reggae band, and they're happily living in New Hampshire. I don't know what Bobby was doing for a living, but Danny was working as a janitor at St. Joseph's College.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, and that's St. Michael's College, and he worked the night maintenance crew. And that was how he was able to put his kids through college and all this stuff. So they're thriving, and then
and it's funny, like that's the perfect thing for Vermont is a reggae band.
Oh yeah,
so that white people can go love black music. Oh, I love.
Oh yeah,
love
and you can make a crap load of money doing that circuit up there, up in like New Hampshire, Vermont.
Yeah.
Just like the meadows of New England. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Dude, you
super
know
cool.
it.
Yeah.
Western Mass.
Yeah.
Come on. Right? Come on. So now, of course, the story takes a very unexpected turn. Unbeknownst to the Hackney brothers, some rumblings begin on the underground and amongst the punk rock punists, and Jello Biafra, of course, has to make an appearance. First because off,
oh my God,
I've never seen Jello Biafra in person. You
yes.
have? I know you have.
Well, because I grew up over there, so the dead Kennedys, in San Francisco,
so the dead
Kennedys were a big deal.
Yeah,
they were like, that was like San Francisco's had its little punk scene as well. East Bay thing. He was insane and it was hard to follow his politics. Sometimes you're like, I don't, but really flamboyant and really funny and kind of like when he comes on camera here, I'm like, where is the show that's just Jello's 45 collection where it's just him explaining, because he buys odd records.
Yeah.
Right.
Talk about record collecting, he says. Well, you go by hunches. I mean, I found this in a thrift store. Glenn Schwartz and the All Saved Freak Band with a brain on the cover. I thought, how can I not take this home? And here's my favorite Christian ventriloquist, Marcy and Little Marcy. Don Bowles, formerly the Germs, actually tracked her down and got one of the dolls a while back. Robbie the Werewolf is sort of self-explanatory. This is a regular old lounge guy, but somebody to haunt you in your dreams. Anyway, so when I saw the death record, the single Politicians in My Eyes, pop up on this one guy's list, buried in everything else, the Northern Soul, as they call it, for ridiculous amounts of money. And there was this little record, Politicians in My Eyes, and I thought, this looks interesting.
I loved him in the movie. I was surprised.
Yeah, I
and
thought
happy
that
to
was
see
fantastic.
him.
It really explained a lot. It really helped bridge what could have been a really obnoxious. Maybe it's just because it hits too close to home, but that just like intelligentsia of indie rock snobs and
Sure,
ugh.
Curators.
Thank you.
Yeah, they put all of their time into the idea of finding these old bands and loving them and this
And
weird
it's like
stuff
if you're just being obscure, is grounds for being awesome, and I just don't buy that.
Yeah,
but
right.
But I felt like Jello, like going through his record collection and explaining, why he bought certain things, and he has like obviously a crazy vinyl collection,
right?
And then he talks about having the single, which by the way, there were only David, after he got the masters back, printed up 545s of Politicians in My Eyes, back with
Knocking on
the Door, whatever.
Yeah.
Not
Heaven's Door.
No,
it is not Heaven's Door.
Just the door.
Yeah,
a door.
A door.
Their door.
Yeah.
Right.
Not the door to success.
No,
the wrong door.
Maybe
it's knocking on the wrong door. I've knocked on the wrong door. Can I come in? This is not the right door for you. I'm coming in. No, this is a mistake. Jello's in here. Jello, you're right. That's funny. That's a whole other thing. We should talk about that because that whole thing of I've realized as I get older, you look at those, the pitchfork as a sort of a broad stroke thing. Those are just people who feel left out originally, and they're shouting loud enough to make sure they're also here. They don't want to disappear. And the only way they can do that is by saying, it's shit, you're shit, this is shit, I know cool shit, because the records I like are just as obscure as I feel in the world. So I feel equanimity with this record that was also left behind and nobody fucking liked it or gave it a chance. You go, okay, right? And every once in a while there's a death in there and you go back or go, they were ahead of their time. And a lot of it that's just poorly recorded and not great. But we've decided to elevate it because, maybe it was left behind, and plus the fat cats, the record companies, and the corporations that fucking that stuff where you go, I'm getting sleepy now.
You've really helped me understand, Greg.
Well, because I thought about it a lot because I always get really pissed. I get a visceral fuck you at Pitchfork because probably they would never think I was awesome. And
right. And maybe that's it because none of those places ever thought I was awesome.
Right.
They always thought I was gossamer, that I was fly by night.
Until everybody shows up and starts screaming about Josie and the Pussycats. You just never know who likes what. It's just the time. It's the time and the times people are in, right? This music, we'll talk about it later because I have a different reaction to it if I had just seen this band fresh now as opposed to knowing the context that they were in.
Right.
Like if I went and saw them today.
Right.
And they'd been around, but I had only came to some and go, this is okay. You have to equate, for me, that goes with your youth.
Right.
So if I'm only getting it for the first time from a guy who's in his 60s, I think, I don't know if this is very good because I don't know what the connect, because some things are felt. If you saw the Sex Pistols now and had never seen them and never heard a note, you go, I don't know why people like this, but I want it to stop.
Yeah.
Right? And some people like me would go, they can keep playing, I don't care how old, right? There's that thing of like...
It requires context.
Context. Some things really do.
Yes. And I think death is definitely what I'm happy that you said that because I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to admit that.
They seemed smart because...
But the context, I mean, the story of what happened to them. And so kind of pushing forward a little bit from the Jello thing, the rumblings of the underground started to become real chatter from real news outlets like
Right.
the New York Times and stuff like that. And they got together and played some shows. And now, we have to talk about the kid. So all of a sudden, after the Talking Head, the Jello Biafra and all of those people, the Talking Heads, there were some other people in there. So all of a sudden, after the Jello Biafra sort of bridge from the past to the present, now we meet Bobby's children, who are like these impossibly great looking black skate punks from Vermont.
They're
in college. It's just like it's so fucking amazing. And the eldest, Bobby Jr., is in college in San Francisco, and one of his friends starts talking about this band called Death and plays him the band. And he's like, "Oh my God, this is my dad."
Yes, right.
And it's
and
like,
then he goes,
what?
He goes, it sounds like my dad. And then I look at the record and it says Hackney, which is their last name. And he's like,
this is my dad.
So
and
he had
my uncles.
zero.
The Hackney brothers never told their children, even though like their kids had grown up with their parents being musicians, they had skipped over the Death part of their music history entirely.
Yes.
And so the kids had no idea. So the next thing you know, the kids start getting involved and like getting the Death masters to what's the name of the record? To Drag City Records. And so Drag City Records puts out the record.
That's a good label.
Yeah, I mean,
the hipster label.
Very credible.
Yeah.
In that world. Like so for the first time the right people are hearing about it at the right time with the right resources and a way to get this out. So, of course, but by now, David, the eldest brother, has died, and so,
sort of they would say he just sort of drank. It sounds like he drank himself to death.
But he ultimately had lung cancer.
And the lung cancer, right? Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure the fact that he was a hopeless alcoholic did not help.
And they do. He is sort of a mystery. They just sort of at a certain point sort of stopped talking about him, kind of after Vermont. Because he was around till 2000, right? So, he was around for a while, and they started a reggae band and were successful doing that. And played with people, and they, just that thing of like, it was clear they weren't gonna give him up for this like they were not gonna. It was probably pretty ugly and very sad and difficult, but they really didn't focus on that too much. Just that it was sad and that they missed him, and it was a big deal, and they obviously felt the loss to the point where they couldn't even talk about the band with their kids.
I don't know. I just think that they thought that it wasn't important. Like they really thought that was just like not
like Josie and the Pussycats.
Maybe
it's kind of every person there was like, I haven't seen this since nobody at your thing had watched it, but thought about it, and everybody was like, what are we doing?
Well, my kids definitely knew. I did not, but there's something of an analogy there. But they were just. I really think
that you
that
move
they
on
didn't
with your life.
They just really didn't think it was worth mentioning.
Well, and already people had said no. It's a similar thing.
I mean, they made a record, but they had never put out anything more than that 45.
Right.
They hadn't played any live shows.
Right.
Like, why would they tell anybody about it?
They had to really come from out of the grave to get back there. It had to really, like, it was an act of like it had to happen.
And
like
you could tell that like this was having this brought back to life in such a way was so shocking to them. But at the same time, they couldn't help but reflect that David kept saying, someday the world is going to come looking for this music. Someday the world is going to come looking for this music. And they thought he was crazy or that he was just a dreamer. And then they talk about it.
Thought nobody in the world would hear this one. David always believed that the world would hear this music.
This whole thing is happening not because of my faith, but all this is happening because of Dave's faith. Dave is the one who said all this stuff was going to happen. We told him he was dreaming. But now we're living it, and that's what's making everything so strange. It's like a movie. And we are the unwitting stars of the movie, you know. And Dave is the director. Even from his grave, he's directing the movie. That's strange.
Yeah, that is great.
It's wild.
It's great. And it really speaks to the fact that these guys did not, like, you are always, the thing with the documentary for me, I think, because you start watching a lot of them and you have to start suddenly watching them with like, am I being manipulated? Whose idea was this?
Right.
And like, I never felt snowed or that these guys were trying to make a thing. I think they were caught up in a really good story and they were happy to tell it and they were happy to be a part of it. And it is really cool. But I never felt like, none of it rang. It never felt like bullshit to me. They didn't overdo the filmmaking. I love the fact that they had maybe 4 photographs of the 4 of them together.
Yeah.
Or the 3 of them together, and they had
And
to
they
take
all
those
look
photographs.
badass.
And, yeah, they had to do this thing where they make the photograph look like it's kind of coming apart. Like they.
How did they do that?
I don't know.
They used this device in the photography of the movie that was like they turned all these like old photographs into 3D.
Yeah, and then they go across, it pans across left or right, and then
So
you sort of come
weird.
to the other side. It's really cool.
It was cool.
But it was also what they had to work with. And they're
Yeah.
like, man, we've only got this.
Yeah, they had like 4.
They definitely had limitations in what they could
snapshots.
do to tell this story other than the recalling of the brother, because there were not even that many pictures of him. So
Right.
it's like, yeah.
Oh my God. So, I mean, the story is just so amazing. Part of what, like, the thing that just like killed me at the end was the fact that they hadn't, like, to go back to this again, that they felt that the story was so not worth telling that they hadn't even mentioned it to their kids.
Right. So a single shows up on eBay. Another record collector buys it. They start chatting about it. One guy starts looking to figure out who the band is. These sort of Henry Owens, I know a little bit from Chunklet, like these sort of online places start to build the myth of this record. Right. And suddenly people are digging to find out more about death.
Yeah. And then they start playing shows again.
Well, so the sons
Right.
get excited about, so now they've got so David Hackney has 2 boys.
3.
Those are all his kids.
Those are all his kids. Danny doesn't have any kids, I don't think. So Bobby has Bobby Jr.,
Right.
Julian, and Urian.
Right. But wait,
So those are the 3
Dave?
kids.
Dave didn't have kids. Wait,
And David didn't have any kids. I don't think David or Danny had kids. Only Bobby had kids.
Okay. So they're like, we got to play this music.
Yeah. And they already had a band, by the way.
They did.
Yeah.
But they renamed, but they start playing these songs.
As David's Gnome de Rock, which was
Rough Francis.
Was it Rough Francis?
Rough Francis.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense.
I actually wrote it down. I think that is right. I think it's called Rough Francis.
Rough Francis, yeah.
Yeah. And they start playing like a tribute band. They start playing all the songs of death that they know, and people love it. So that's all happening, and they get asked to do a show in Detroit, but could they get their dads together to play as Death?
Yeah.
And they're like, they don't have a
band.
They don't have a band really.
So they got the guitar player from their reggae band, Lamb's Breath.
Lamb's Bread.
Anyway, that doesn't even matter. They got the guitar player from the reggae band to replace Dave on guitar. And when they heard him play, the guitar player felt a huge sense of responsibility to like live up. They didn't really think that this guitar player was going to be able to do it. Cause like
it's really specific too. Like you listen to it, you go like you think, oh, this sounds easy. It's like the Ramones. You go, yeah, but it's not easy to replicate. It's not easy to do what that is. It's its own. He has his own real guitar sound. Yeah. It's really kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So he apparently is so good at it that at the beginning of the first song they have to stop because one guy has to go outside to cry.
Yeah.
And the other guy just cries inside.
Right.
And the other guy's like, did I fuck this up? I'm so sorry.
Like I'll do
and
it
they're
right
like, no, it's just too real. Right. It's so real. And it feels like a genuine thing where they literally, I think, just brought their brother back. I think that relationship is super complicated. They didn't expect that this was going to be a thing they were going to be doing. And it was like overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, and they're all three very religious.
Yep.
And they all feel like it's a spiritual, like there's a
like
thing
a connection.
happening. Yeah,
right.
which in some ways, if you look at the story, you're like, wow, it's sort of hard to argue with it. There was some kind of emotion, kind of thing.
The whole thing was based around the idea of this triangle, that the concept that David came up with, which is what?
Lamb's bread. It's a strain of weed, lamb's bread.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Good for them. They don't mention their relationship with pot. We don't know if they have a relationship with pot.
They say something. There's a song about like spark up the ganja or fire up the ganja or something like that. But I guess you have to do that if you're in a reggae band.
If you're in a reggae
how
band.
do you like
right. What do
have
people,
a reggae band if
what's
you don't
the message?
at some point? Right.
What's the message?
It's like God and weed.
Well, I get
and
it. I
they're
love
like
everybody, but we're going to get high, right?
Right.
There's going to be weed? Yeah.
There's like, will there be weed?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yes, there will be weed.
Right. And we're not playing to like actual Jamaicans where it's a religious thing. We just need to get white kids to want to smoke pot to come out.
Right. Or this is the place where you can pretend that you smoke pot.
That's right.
Even if you don't.
That's right.
Right. So I totally lost my train of thought.
They play the triangle.
Oh yeah, the triangle, right. So Dave's like big concept was like the triangle, the death triangle represented the triangle of the essence of man, which is like the mental, the spiritual, the physical.
Right.
And then with the third, so there's 3 points for the triangle, and then there's an extra point down on the like right-hand corner of the triangle, and that represents God, who is like overseeing the triangle. It's like he really. I'm doing a terrible job of explaining.
No, that's all. No.
But that's basically it. So the fact that like the God component of their mental, physical, spiritual world, and David overseeing this from heaven or whatever, it was all incredibly emotional for them, and like you can't direct that, you can't edit that kind of feeling. It's so honest and true.
Yeah, and it's that interesting thing where, and I think probably this was my what I liked about it, and what I like. I mean, it's a story I enjoy all the time. One of my favorite documentaries, which I think we'll get to next time, I'd love to, is the End of the Century, which is about the Ramones.
Oh yeah,
and it's maybe it's really well done, and it's one of the saddest ones I've ever seen.
Oh,
because it just didn't work out for them, or so they thought.
Oh,
right. Most of what's happened to the Ramones has happened post them, each one at a time dying.
Oh,
right. Like their fame. I mean, they had fame, but they didn't have wealth, and they didn't have the kind of recognition that they enjoy today. Like if they played today, they would be. You could have them for both
Wembley.
Weekends of Coachella, right? They could have.
Oh my God, yes.
Right, they're this thing. But this is a thing where these guys were never going to be talked. This was never part of the discussion.
No.
Right? Imagine it'd be like if I was saying to Rick, I had a band called the New Sheridans when I came down here. It would be like if somebody one day went, man, people really want to see that band. I'd be like, what? What are you talking about? Like, why? Like, there's no artifact either. There's nothing but a 45 we made years and years and years ago. But that's this story. And it got into the hands of the right people. So as much as those tastemakers are the people that, are like, oh, why are they so mean? They found something good. They found something worthy, and they passed it along to each other, and they made it happen. And then it caused the release of the masters to put the whole 35 years it took to make that record.
Right. Amazing. It was such a great story, and it could not have happened to more worthy people.
Yes. And the filmmaking was great.
The filmmaking was really great.
Yeah, really good. Talented.
Just, before we rate it, can we just play the one last clip?
Yes, of course.
This is Bobby talking about Dave and a lesson that he learned from Dave.
Whenever I say death, I think about my brother David. He convinced us. Not only did he convince us, but he inspired us, because we had the chance change the name. And I think David was the prime example of what the Lord said when he said, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and to lose his soul? And David's music was a soul, and he never wavered on that. And the chance came. Change your name, and I'll give you the world. And David didn't waver. And I'm proud of him. And I love him. And I honor him for that.
I mean, that ends the argument right there.
It's so amazing.
That's so awesome. And you know, it's a weird thing to think about, like, but if you look at like all the stuff that's happening in the news and all these, you know, like the Weinstein thing, the Manafort thing, like these people who traded everything, right? That's what it, right? They lost their souls.
Yeah.
They had everything, and eventually it like that, you know, kind of like it comes back to, what's the point? What was the point then?
It's so hard to have integrity in this world.
Oof.
And it's so hard to like, there are so many
I've tried to order it from Amazon. You can't even, you can't. It is, right?
Yeah. There's just so many distractions and so many, especially when you're on a creative path, when you're not punching a clock, when you don't have a boss, when you're really just relying on your own compass to lead the way of where you're going. It's real easy to get pulled off your path. And that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's good to have like the influence of other people to help show you the right way to go. But then there's like your core beliefs about who you are and where you're going that like we can't afford to lose as creators, you know?
Right. But they're you're right.
It's so hard to stay true to those.
Hard.
And like, so this story, it doesn't always work out like this. You know, like this is a great story, but for every story like this, like I can show you 1,000 people. And not that there's anything wrong. Like this guy was so happy to be working as a janitor and putting his kids through school and playing his reggae festivals on the weekend. Like he didn't need this to happen for him to be happy.
No,
and maybe that's the point.
Right. His whole thing was like, I figured out how to make a life. I get to do what I want. I have a job. I have kids. Like there was no self-pitying, no victimization, no any of it. Just gratitude, you know? I mean, I think sometimes with super spiritual people, if their spirituality sets them up to win, if it is a belief that you really don't have a lot of control, maybe that's because he did not. That's what it felt like with the other two guys. They're like, man, we can't control him. They're his songs. We're not. That's a fight I don't want to have. Right. I'm gonna let him, and then he's gonna go his way. Unfortunately, he was too self-willed and drove himself out of the world. But his music bear fruit. Yeah. And it's tough when you have other people going along on the ride with you and you're like, this decision isn't just mine.
Right.
Like I can put a lot of faith in myself in an idea, but now I've got 5 other people who are hoping that idea is going to work out, which is hard.
Yeah.
Because you're taking a risk, you know?
How many tough nose do you give this? I
got to go 4 or 5.
Yeah.
4 or 5. Yeah. Only because I think the only thing missing for me was a bigger profile of Dave. I would have loved to have learned or had more about the brother, you know, a little bit more about his struggle, a little bit more where his lyric, like it's just more.
Yeah, more about the
reveal.
Music. Yeah,
because that's the missing part. But boy, those guys,
so worth seeing. Seeing this movie.
Yeah,
for so many reasons. Like it worked on like as a piece of filmmaking. It like cinematically, it was shot beautifully. Even like the older stuff was treated in such a cool way.
Yep.
Like just not a single frame was wasted.
Yep.
Not a single talking head moment was wasted. Even the Kid Rock thing, which was like, so why is he even here? It's like, I guess because he's from Detroit. And of course the requisite Henry Rollins. Like if I die and you do a documentary about my life, like if Henry Rollins is not in it, I'm going to feel like I failed.
Right. He belongs in them. Every time I see him,
it's like just bring him up to speed.
Yeah,
on
I
my
love
life.
it. There's a certain kind of one that always has Clem Burke from Blondie who has something to say about everything.
He lives around here too.
Yeah. He has something to say. He would come on here. I can get him to come on here.
Let's do it.
He'd be fun. He's nuts, but he's fun. He'd be fun. But there's but what if Elijah Wood is in my documentary, why was he there? I thought maybe he's a producer.
Maybe.
I don't know. I'm happy for him to like it, but that at the I saw that to me is, and he was doing that kind of those setups that they always do in like We Are the 80s or whatever, which is, oh yeah, cornflakes. They were like the best cereal, like that thing of. I remember cornflakes came out in 19, but like you don't remember that. That's the thing they're making you say. And I felt like he was giving context, and it's like you were going. I always get him confused with the kid that went out in the Sean Penn movie where he goes out in the woods and dies.
What?
What's that actor's name? Elijah Wood. Anyway,
I don't know.
Or the kid from. I sometimes get him confused with Harry Potter too. I get them confused.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, which
Bilbo Baggins
which gigantic science fiction movie is he from? He's a sweet kid, but it's weird to have him in here.
It's weird to have him there.
Right. He may be he might be the reason for not getting a 5.
No.
Why was he there?
I don't know. But he kind of like, I forgot he was there until you just mentioned it.
And I wish there'd been more from they had from Cult of Personality, that band.
Oh, Vernon Reid.
Hey, Vernon Reid.
Vernon Reid was. I would have loved to hear more from
Vernon
him
Reid
too.
seemed like he would have a
really interesting take.
Right, because he's
on that.
Yeah, he's got a chip in this pot, right? Like he's had the adventure of being a chip in the pot. I don't know what that means. I think I made it up.
No, that makes total sense to me.
No, what is it? In a hand in the game. Anyway, he was in a black. He has some skin in the game. Because he was in a black rock and roll band during a very white rock and roll time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And their biggest mistake was just thinking that they could actually wear body glove suits on stage.
Man.
Right? That's you lose 15 pounds just.
Who was the singer? Was Corey Glover?
Corey Glover. Yeah.
He was hot.
Yeah.
They all were.
They were great.
They wore but I feel like I'm. Like in terms of the outfitting, I'm conflating them with Milli Vanilli in my head right now.
Yeah, no, they wore the body glove wetsuits. They wore Dayglow He wore a Dayglow wetsuit, which was like super cool look, not practical at all. You're wearing a seal. You're wearing a seal over you.
They played Cult of Personality at Spin Class the other day, and I was fucking going crazy for it.
And that's what they'd hoped would happen.
Yes.
You might not think this is cool now, but when they have indoor bicycles for indoor white women, this shit's gonna go. You just wait. It was
really, really inspiring. It was like at the end of class, and I was just like, I felt like I could have gone for another hour.
Yeah.
Which is really.
Yeah. I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
All right, rock out with your doc out. Season 1 successful. I feel.
Yeah. My name is Kay Hanley.
I'm Greg Barrett.
And Rick is over there. He's going to edit this beautifully for us because that's what he does. And we'll see you next season. Give us some ideas about what you want us to review next.
And we're gonna hopefully give you a syllabus so you know what's coming up for the whole season.
Yes.
We're gonna do it a little bit differently next time. All right.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
1, 2, 3, now. They wanna be boss, they don't care who they step on, as long as they get along. Politicians in my eyes. They thinking less about you, they thinking less about me. As long as they are in the place that they want to be, they're always wearing false smiles, like they go with the style. Politicians in my eyes. Responsible. politicians and